Well, I think most of you guys know me. I'm Steve Thompson. I'm someone who married into this family, so I'm not really related to John. I'm married to one of his nieces, so Dorothy is my wife, and so I don't really have funny stories or maybe that interesting stories to tell about John, but just a few really just reflections about him that I think just sort of speak to his character. Brent put together the photo book, which, by the way, thank you, Brent, for doing that, because that was. But as I read through that, looked at the photos and read through the different people's reflections, a few different sort of themes came to my mind about John. I call him Uncle John, even though he's not really my uncle, but he's Dorothy's uncle, and he's always been Uncle John to me. So Uncle John, some of the themes that came out were that he was a very welcoming person, very social, made you feel important. If you meet him at a social event, he'd talk to you and just made you feel welcome and important. And another theme was a good instructor at whether it's barbecuing, whether it's fishing, whether it's being an instructor, a pilot instructor, and then also being a good golfer. And so I think about those three themes: the welcoming part, the instructing part, and the golf part. I have personal reflections about all those. So the welcoming, when I was when Dorothy and I were getting ready to get married, we got engaged, and I just remember we were at some family get-together, and Uncle John just made it a point to. I felt like he went out of his way to just come and talk to me and get to know me, and just make me feel like part of the family. Just that's the way he was. He was just very, very personable. He connected with you, and he just always, even there was that time, and then any other time I saw him, he would just always make me feel like I was important, and that he just respected the relationship and was just very giving of himself. And interestingly, all these stories about him being a hero and things like that, and Alan obviously had a lot to share and heard about his war stories. I never heard any of that from him. He was always very unassuming. I knew he was the hero that he was, but he never carried that around and made it a thing, like to hold over you or anything. He was just a very gracious, welcoming guy. On the instructor part, when again, going back to, I think before Dorothy and I were married, we went down to San Diego, down to Mission Bay, and Uncle John and Aunt Denise were renting a place down there, and we went down. We lived in LA at the time, and we went down and visited them, hung out for the weekend, and Uncle John said, "I'm going to take you out and teach you how to sail." And I'm like, I have never sailed before. I was like, I don't know anything. I grew up in Missouri. I grew up in it's like I just don't know anything about sailing. It's like, we're going to teach you to sail. So we go out and we rent one of these boats, and I don't remember what it was, maybe a laser or something. It was not just a simple little sunfish with one sail. It actually had two sails. So this is like, not the most basic. What's that? No. This was a sailboat we rented. No, it wasn't one. No. So it actually had a mainsail and a jib, and he's like, before the end of the day, you're going to be sailing this thing. I'm like, okay, all right. So we went out, and I mean, sure enough, he showed me what to do, showed me how to tack when you're going into the wind, showed me how to sail downwind, even taught me, and he's like, okay, now the hardest thing is learning how to bring the boat into the dock under wind power, and judging it just precisely to get the right amount of speed and momentum going to the dock, but not too much, and then drop the mainsail right at the right time and let the wind power on the jib take you in. And sure, he showed me once, and then we tried it a couple times, and sure enough, by the end of the day, I knew how to do that. And he was just very patient, very, I think someone said firm. He was very firm. He knew what to do and knew how to teach. And, I just thought that was really cool. He just gave of himself to just show me how to do that. And It's kind of funny because I've never sailed a sailboat since then, I don't think. but it always stuck with me. And then golf. So yeah, he obviously was a really good golfer, really enjoyed the game. And I was reflecting about, we used to do this family get together on Thanksgiving, and we'd have this little event that we called the Turkey Cup, and we'd go out and play a little, I guess you could call it a golf tournament of our own that we made up, that we would do the day after Thanksgiving. And I was reflecting on that and going, he never won the Turkey Cup. He never won the Turkey Cup. And I was thinking, what a shame. But then I remembered and I realized, so John Marsden, Taylor, and I think AJ. Where's AJ? Oh, okay. So the very first Turkey Cup was John, Taylor, me, and AJ. And we made up the rules of this silly tournament. And I realized, reflecting on this, why John never won. It's because we made these rules so that even a crappy golfer could win the Turkey Cup. And so John was too good of a golfer. That's what the issue was. He never won the Turkey Cup because it was us hackers that were the ones that would win the Turkey Cup. He couldn't win it because he was too good. So anyway, that's all I have.
All right. Rusty.
My name's Rusty Madison, and Uncle John was my uncle. And I really enjoyed being around him, but it was usually, he was a disciplinarian. Because I had 5 sisters, I had my 2 cousins, his daughters were girls, and so my job was to make them scream and have fun. And that would irritate Uncle John every now and then. And I was fortunate enough to grow up with some men, not very many women, but men from World War II, Korean War, and the Vietnam War, all down at a 12,000 square foot hangar at Falcon Field, and working with these incredibly talented and disciplined men in a maintenance type operation, working on single engine fighters, personal aircraft of my father's. And every once in a while, my great hero, the fighter pilot, Uncle John, would show up, and basically I would acknowledge him and he would acknowledge me, and I tried to just stay out of trouble because he'd have an eye on me a lot. And the last thing I wanted to do is have his steely blue eyes lock in on me, and which happened several times. And my father was kind of heavy-handed, but Uncle John, all he had to do was look at me. And it was very effective, and there's a few stories. One, I wrote a small story that's in Brent's book, and I appreciate your effort on that, Brent. That was outstanding. But there was one other story where he took us up to this R&R place in Flagstaff. What's the name of that place? Boot Hill or something. What is it? Fort Tuthill. So Flagstaff several years ago would get a lot of snow, and he would take us up there and we'd go skiing at the Snow Bowl, and then he'd rent a cabin for us. Well, they had this really long sled run, and we were just having the time of our lives sliding down this sled deal, and Uncle John was there, watching all this. And so I decided to play a little trick on my cousins, and I wiped out and pretended like I, hurt myself and was blacked out. And so I got the reaction out of Dana and Tamara that I wanted, but I carried it on a little too long, and the next thing I knew is Uncle John was standing over me. I opened one eye and instantly knew I was in trouble. And I don't remember what he said because it usually wasn't much. All he'd have to do is look at me. But I behaved on the rest of the trip. But I remember one time down at Falcon Field, we had this twin-engine Israeli-made jet aircraft, and Uncle John was coming down to fly it. And I remember one of my jobs at the hangar was to mow we had a big square piece of grass where the helicopters would hover over and so on. And I remember Uncle John and one of our other pilots, Uncle John was going to be flying left seat, which is a captain's seat. And I thought how cool that was. And I remember seeing the aircraft coming in on final and just how immensely proud I was that was my Uncle John in the left seat. And even though I endeavored to make him proud, I'm not sure how well I did, but I enjoyed every second being around him and some of his friends because I knew they were all top-notch, great men. So I miss Uncle John. I know Anthony's heart is shattered, and I hope that she gets over it and finds peace in her life, and we can all enjoy his memory. And that's about all I got to say.